Damaged by Please Dial 123, Chapter 15, Siblings. You bastard! Naruto sat straight up to the yell, eyes snapping open, claws ready. He raised the brow at Tamari. The blonde looked absolutely furious as she snarled at him from just inside his door. Kankuro was holding her back from assaulting him and looked gobsmacked. Seems they had found his room. He gave a lazy smirk as he fiddled with his braid, leaning back idly on one hand. Oh, he questioned in an absent manner, infuriating her more. He could see what she suspected. She had walked in to find him curled up against her younger brother, neither wearing anything waist up, the boxers hidden beneath the cover, and the manner in which Gaara had acted so submissive last night aroused her suspicion that it was due to the boy instinctive knowing Naruto was stronger and the demon in him also knowing the same thing. How dare you touch him! She yelled, shuddering with rage. How did you touch him anyways? Kankuro asked. Gaara, woken by his sister's shout, looked a bit disorientated. Well, it was his first time sleeping, even if Naruto had forced it after an hour of trying last night. He also seemed confused of his location as he sat up. His eyes briefly widened as he took everything in. Then surprisingly he looked down like he was embarrassed. To Tamari, this probably made Naruto even more suspicious. Did you blackmail him or threaten him? She snarled at him. I'll rip you apart! Seemed she loved her brother more than Naruto had suspected. He had thought she just had those instinctive sibling feelings that no matter how she tried to deny them, did love her brother as family. Seemed she had accepted those feelings, and they had grown into overprotective big sister syndrome. Interesting, Naruto decided to play with them. He leaned over and grasped Gaara's chin with long, delicate-looking fingers, tipped with inch and a half tall claw-like nails. He turned Gaara's face so it faced him and kissed the boy. He tilted his head and leaned over Gaara slightly, making sure he looked dominant. He could feel the sand in the room twitch around violently with Gaara's emotion of shock and molded the wind around them to keep the sand from accidentally hitting them or his siblings. Naruto slipped his tongue into the redhead's mouth and was met with a small whimper/moan. It was amusing. The boy was a submissive and open lover. As he pulled back, he gave a saucing smirk and licked his lips. Kankuro was so shocked he had let Tamari go and was staring wide-eyed and slack-jawed. Tamari was shaking with contained fury and twitching drastically, looking at Naruto with murder in her eyes. I will kill you, she whispered harshly. She swung her battle fan up. As it opened, she lunged at him. He dodged in a move too fast for her to see, and she hit air. Luckily, it was just a slash, not a wind attack. Now she was next to Gaara. She licked her lips nervously. Are you okay, Gaara? She loved her little brother, but was still as nervous as hell around him, thinking he would kill her. Gaara, now with the shock hidden away, gave her an absolutely blank look. He looked exactly like he did the night before when he had been collected. So he looked like usual. Tamari didn't focus on Naruto anymore, so didn't notice him leaning idly against the wall next to Kankuro. The boy had immediately spotted his boxers. So, you didn't screw Gaara? The boy asked. No, he said blankly but bluntly. And you aren't in a relationship with him? No, that was just to get on her nerves. The boy gave a confused look but nodded. He tensed though as he saw the gourd slowly floating on the sand towards Gaara. Tamari, he hissed in a warning. She spotted the sand with wide eyes and stumbled backwards. As Gaara strapped the gourd to his back, he stood. His siblings stared at the two like seal, and Gaara just stared at Naruto. He bowed at the waist, low, surprising his siblings into silence. Thank you, Uzumaki Naruto. I am in your debt. Just protect them and cherish them. The redhead bowed lower. Kimimaru stepped into the doorway in the sleeping kimono. Do you need any assistance, Naruto-sama, or shall I start breakfast? Please start some breakfast. Sakura and Sasuke should awake in another half an hour. The boy gave a nod and walked off. You may stay here in the upper levels if you wish for the next 5 days. Thanks, Kankuro said absently, still staring at his brother. What did you do to him? Tamari questioned instead. I fixed his heel, Naruto said, as if it were no big deal. Their breath caught. He may now sleep and use the demon chakra without losing control. He will no longer have demons screaming in his mind either. He is now all Gaara. Tamara licked her lips as if hesitant, then threw her arms around Gaara in a hug. When she didn't die by sand a moment later, she burst into sobs and hugged him tighter. Gaara appeared horribly confused. After a few minutes, Naruto finally got Kankuro and Tamara to leave after promising not to do anything inappropriate with Gaara. When they were gone, he moved to his closet and pulled some clothes out for Gaara. They emerged from the room a moment later, Gaara was now dressed in baggy tan pants that billowed out but tucked in at the ankles with elastic. He wore a deep red Chinese-style shirt with short and which was quite long, falling to his knees with slits up to the sides to his waist. He also wore soft but durable brown leather shoes and his gourd. Many would have been surprised to see those clothes in Naruto's closet, but he had quite a few various outfits. When he had freed a company from Gato's clutches, he had gained shares of that company, and when a merchant caravan had entered Konoha, sponsored by that company, they had given him a large amount of supplies, a gift from the company. The company was a clothing company that sold ninja clothes and civilian clothes all over the elemental countries. They had loaded him with a lot of new styles. He had just stuffed them in a closet in case he ever needed them. Now he needed them, though the shoes he had made himself. When weary Sakura and Sasuke joined the group in the kitchen half an hour later, they were surprised and confused to find Tamaru switching between hugging Gaara to death, chatting Naruto's ear off, chatting Gaara's ear off, and yelling at Kankuro. Kiyomaru was watching with a slight amused smirk. Naruto was idly eating. Gaara was sitting there, staring impassively at the window, seeming to ignore them all, and Kankuro was grumbling as he ate, but sending Gaara and Naruto quick looks. Naruto looked at Tamari, who was fidgeting nervously, hands wriggling behind her back as she looked at the ground. I wanted to thank you, she blurted out. He raised a brow. I mean, I've always loved Gaara like a little brother, but because of the demon, he was unstable, and I couldn't act like a sister. So thank you. She bowed low, and Naruto just stepped up to her. As she straightened, she left the hand on and swept her bangs to the side like she was a child. She shuddered beneath his touch. You are curious, though, he stated, on why Gaara was so calm and submissive around me before the demon was sealed. She shuddered again, but nodded. It is because, he smirked, his demon knew I was stronger than it, even without Kyubi, and that I would have no mercy for it or Gaara should they have gotten in my way. She cringed back slightly. Naruto just pulled back. If you are looking for something to do, he said absently, there is a workout room on the first floor along with the dojo. There is also an onsen. There's a TV in the living room on the second floor, and you are free to use the kitchen if you wish. Kiyomaru can point you around if you need help. She gave a curt nod and licked her lips nervously. May I ask where you're going? She probably wished to go the opposite way of him. I'm going outside to garden. She blinked in surprise, but quickly nodded and took off. He smirked after her. To strike such fear because of his own power? Delicious. Naruto set the large vase of freshly cut flowers on the table. They were straight from his garden, like the basket of vegetables on the counter. Sakura, who sat ready at the table, surprisingly stared at him as if he were insane. Kankuro was sneaking glances at her, startled looks. You and flowers don't mix, she said deadpanned. Naruto gave a half smile. Oh, you're more of a person to dip them in blood and laugh. He gave a chuckle and leaned over the table, putting his face closer to her. He noticed the closer he got to people, the more unnerved they became. It was an intimidation tactic. And why do you think that, Sakura? He asked cheerfully and kindly. She cringed back. You're just faking, she muttered. You're not kind. He gave a smirk and in a move too fast for her to see, had grabbed her by the throat. She made a choked sound but stayed absolutely still. You're wrong, he purred. If I wasn't kind, you'd be dead. She gave a quick nod and he dropped her. She grabbed her scroll and bolted. You're more unstable than Gaara, Kankuro remarked quietly. Naruto gave him a half-lidded smile. Who said I'm unstable? I'm just unpredictable. End of chapter 15. Damaged by Police Style 123, Chapter 16, Semifinals. Naruto was amused to find Sakura and Sasuke sitting in the workout room exhausted. Seems they had taken some training seriously. They watched him cautiously as he entered. He just gave them a half smile each and looked out the window. The preliminary rounds are tomorrow. Rest for now. Then he turned and exited the room, almost running into Gaara. The redhead raised a brow at him. Naruto blinked and then smirked at the animal currently sitting on the boy's shoulder. The animal was an off-colored raccoon, being a light brown instead of gray. It looked at him and chattered softly as it tilted its head. I see you've been back in the forest. I got rid of a team that had been bothering me. Naruto shrugged. The raccoon will not leave me. Naruto gave a soft laugh. The animals of my forest are very smart. If he likes you, you can keep him. Gaara sent the raccoon a wild, annoyed look. Naruto spotted Kankuro holding in laughter at the end of the hall as he saw the raccoon. Naruto lovingly patted the dirt around his newest addition to his garden. Gardening was something he loved, actually loved. He could sense Sakura in the doorway and Gaara sitting on the bench. No one but Gaara and Kiyomaru dared enter his garden. He had almost killed Sasuke when the boy had almost stepped on one of his flowers. He had strangled the boy into unconsciousness before Gaara could pull him off. Now Gaara only entered, and when he did, he only sat on the wooden bench and watched. Kiyomaru also would enter once in a while, but he usually didn't stay long. Naruto's garden circled half the tower, stretching to the fence that also circled the tower, which was about 10 meters from the tower wall on every side. The first half of the garden was just solid flowers. The second part was filled with vegetables and fruits. Each garden contained a pebble walkways, which he had taken the time to drag pebbles and stones to actually make. Kimara had also carved him a bench, showing the white-haired boy had some skill with wood. It was the same bench Gaara currently sat on in the shade of a cherry blossom tree. Naruto paused in planting his new lily and straightened his back. Satisfied to hear it pop, he stood and stretched, basking in the warmth of the sun and inhaling the scent of flowers. Then he rifled through his pockets till he found a small clay instrument. It was the one he had made years ago that sounded like an owl. He put it to his lips and gave a short hoot, followed by a longer one. He pulled the flute away and watched the edge of the fence. A minute later, a smaller cloud of minuscule butterflies flew over. He smiled at the small swarm of the specially camouflaged butterflies. They weren't as smart as some animals, but they knew better than to bother him when he gardened. They avoided the garden when he was planting, but as soon as the hoot came, they all swarmed back. He had the largest patch of flowers in the forest, and they loved him for it. He was slightly surprised to see one of his large butterflies come with them. This butterfly was as long as his arm, and each wing was wide as his chest. They were a mix of blood reds and blacks. He frowned as he spotted a letter weighted down. He gently took it and recognized the Hokage seal. Why would the Hokage send him a letter with a butterfly? Unless he was in the forest, and this was the first flying animal he saw. Naruto drew his blood and swiped it over the letter. Sarutobi always made blood seals on their letters in case his animals were overcome. He opened it and frowned as he read, Orochimaru. This was getting interesting. He briefly noted his large butterfly had flown off his head and straight for Sakura. It landed on her head, fluttering its wings. Sakura was looking at it in surprise, slowly as if unsure. She held an arm out. It landed on it without a second thought, and she stared at it and all. Naruto frowned just slightly. Seems she'd found a partner. Naruto gazed at the area blankly. He sat crouched on the rail above, balanced perfectly on the small round handrail. His body was slightly hunched and his spear was propped in the crook of his elbow. He looked down at the arena through a one half-lidded eye. Feeling bored, Sasuke had destroyed the other Leaf Nin. Shino had won his battle. Kankuro had won his battle. Tamari had won her battle. Shikamaru had won his battle. Shino had his low-level opponent knocked out when as the referee said so. Sakura was facing Ino. Seems they had studied and trained enough to get an edge on the blonde. He blinked once in faint surprise as she charged her fist with chakra and slammed it into Ino, releasing the chakra with perfect control. Seems she had been reading in on Tsunade's techniques. As Ino was knocked against the wall, unconscious, Sakura collapsed, painting a grin on her face. Kakashi swooped down and grabbed her before Lee and Gaara entered the arena. The battle was quite advanced. Lee had terrifying speed, not as good as Naruto's, but still fast. Gaara had a good defense though. As Lee released the gates, Naruto frowned lightly. Gaara still won though. Just as he was about to crush Lee's hands and legs, though, Naruto held up a hand. Gaara noticed and just threw the boy against the wall. As he shunshin back up the stairs, he stopped to stand by Naruto, not his team. Surprised a few people. Naruto just gave a brief nod, tapped the red head, and returned to watching the arena. Neji versus Hinata. The boys started straight off with belittling. It probably would have worked had it not worked with Ibiki for the past 8 months. The fight progressed quite quickly afterwards. Neither was willing to give up, but it was clear it was a draw. If they had only been using their clan techniques, it was obvious Neji would win, but Hinata was using pressure points with Senbon in a different Taijutsu style which Neji neither knew of. In the end of it, it was a draw. Satori proclaimed them to both be the tuning level, but as he could not promote them earlier, he said they both progressed on. Last match, Kiba versus Naruto. Naruto pushed off from the railing, dropping effortlessly to the ground. As he hit, he didn't even make a sound. Kiba looked really nervous, as almost looking ready to give up. Then he seemed to slap some confidence into himself and jumped into the arena with Akamaru. The dog was whimpering but following. As Hayate started their match, Naruto waited. Kiba, of course, attacked first, changing Akamaru first before using his Gatsuga. He hit air. Naruto, to the audience, seemed to be hit, then appear a little ways to the side. The higher level shinobi could see he was fluidly dodging every attack at the last second, almost too fast for them to see. He seemed to flow like water around the attacks. Finally, he got bored. In a moment of fast for most to see, he was charging at the two spears raised to slash. Immediately, Kakashi, Kurenai, Guy, and Hayate surged forwards to stop him, predicting his attack to slice Kiba's throat. Naruto was too fast for them. His spear ripped through the flesh and blood sprayed out. Kiba howled in pain, collapsing, a huge gash across his chest. Naruto had changed the track of his spear at the last second. As Kiba hit the ground, Naruto found Hayate catching the boy, Guy holding a fist at his throat, Kakashi holding a kunai to his lower back, and Kurenai holding a kunai to his stomach. Kiba was carted away by the medics, and slowly Guy was the first to move away. Kakashi pulled back next. Kurenai glared at him, angry at him for harming her student. She slowly pulled back, and Naruto gave her a flat look, vanishing to reappear by the Hokage, back on the railing. He had enough speed to look like he had done a Shunshin. He prided himself with his speed and strength, which he had built up over the years, and which Kyuubi had changed his body to handle. No one would ever match his speed. The human body could only take a certain speed, but Naruto could go beyond that. Most of the other genin were giving him worried looks. The next matchups were set: Naruto versus Neji, Shikamaru versus Temari, Hinata versus Kankuro, Gaara versus Sasuke, Chicago versus Shino. End of chapter 16.